Usually when we look at a blueprint, um, there's this expectation of optimism, right?
Right. Yeah. Like you're building something.
Exactly. You trace the lines on the paper, the structural supports, and you can see this skyscraper waiting to be born.
An architecture of progress.
Yes. But the source material you brought us today for this deep dive, it completely flips that.
It really does.
Like, we are looking at a structural layout that is, quite honestly, a masterclass in collapse.
Yeah. I mean, it is the definitive anatomy of how a liberation movement dismantles itself.
Completely.
We are digging into the introductory context in the first 7 chapters of George Orwell's Animal Farm. And since you, listening to this, are already familiar with the foundational text, our mission today isn't to just, recount the plot.
No, we don't need a book report.
Right. It is to dissect the mechanics. We want to analyze how this allegory maps the precise, step-by-step psychological and structural shifts that occur when liberators transform into oppressors.
And I want to make it super clear right up front as we unpack this text, we are acting strictly as your analytical guides today.
Totally impartial.
Exactly. We are just here to examine the author's work and his historical intent. We're isolating the mechanics of revolution, power, and truth manipulation without endorsing any specific political ideology from the left or the right.
Right. We are just looking at how the machine operates.
Right. And to understand the machine, we really have to look at the engineer first.
Yeah, you cannot separate this specific text from Eric Arthur Blair, who, was writing under the pen name George Orwell.
Right. The guy behind the curtain.
Exactly. The introductory material you provided highlights his background as a democratic socialist, but one with a really profound opposition to totalitarianism.
Specifically, like Moscow-directed Stalinism.
Yes. But the thing is, that opposition wasn't just born in a library. He wasn't just reading theory.
No, it was forged in active combat and deep personal trauma.
It really was.
So let's trace that trauma, because to me it feels like the absolute DNA of these early chapters.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, Orwell served as a police officer in Burma in the 1920s, which kind of gave him this front row seat to the daily machinery of empire.
Right. He saw the oppression firsthand.
But the true crucible seems to be the Spanish Civil War in the late 1930s.
Yeah, I'd say the Spanish Civil War is the Rosetta Stone for this book.
Wow, okay. Break that down for us.
Well, Orwell fought as a volunteer with the Republicans against the fascists, right?
Yeah.
And he specifically joined a militia called the POUM.
The POUM.
Yeah, POUM. The POUM was a Marxist group, but crucially, and this is the important part, it was not aligned with the communist factions backed directly by the Soviet Union.
Ah, okay. So there's a divide on the same side.
Exactly. And while he was there, Orwell was severely wounded in combat. He was actually shot straight through the throat by a sniper.
Which is just terrifying to even think about.
Right. But the physical wound is almost secondary to the psychological one here.
Because the betrayal didn't come from the fascists he was shooting at, did it?
No, it didn't. It came from the people standing on his own side of the trench.
That is just, wow.
As the Soviet-aligned factions consolidated power within the Republican side, they turned on the independent left-wing militias. Orwell and his wife were actively hunted.
Hunted by their own allies.
Yes. They were accused of rabid Trotskyism.
Which was like a catch-all term, right?
Exactly. It was a term used to brand anyone opposing the centralized Moscow line as a traitor to the broader revolution. They were tried in absentia and barely escaped Spain with their lives.
Well, what, their friends were being locked up?
Imprisoned or executed by their own supposed comrades.
Man. So when we read Old Major's speech in Chapter 1, we really aren't just reading a cute farmyard fable.
Not at all.
We're reading a theory of revolution, authored by a man who literally watched a revolution devour its own children.
That's the exact context you need.
Okay, so let's look closely at Old Major, the 12-year-old prize boar. He gathers the animals in the barn to share his dream, kind of acting as the philosophical architect of this whole rebellion.
The visionary.
Right. And he diagnoses their problem perfectly. He says their lives are miserable, laborious, and short. And then he offers this devastatingly simple solution.
Right. He provides the ultimate binary. He says, all men are enemies. All animals are comrades.
It's so clean.
It is. Old Major defines man as the only creature that consumes without producing. He says, man gives no milk, lays no eggs, cannot pull the plow, yet is lord of all.
Which makes a lot of sense if you're a cow or a horse.
Exactly. And from a sociological standpoint, this binary is just the most potent tool for starking a mass movement.
Because it unites everybody.
Yes. You
Yeah.
take a highly fractured, diverse group of oppressed individuals, and you flatten all their nuanced differences by pointing them at a singular, easily identifiable other.
Okay, but I want to push back on the viability of that binary for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because during this very speech, the dogs suddenly attack a group of rats that creep out of their holes.
Oh, right, the rat incident.
Yeah. Old Major literally has to pause the grand vision of unity to hold a formal vote on whether rats are actually comrades.
And they vote yes.
They vote yes. But I look at that moment, and my instinct is that this entire utopian vision is fundamentally flawed from minute one. I mean, if your ideological framework requires you to vote away the biological reality that dogs eat rats, aren't you just legislating a fantasy?
That's a really interesting point.
Like, the animals are nodding along, but they are completely ignoring the underlying laws of nature.
I see what you're saying, but I would frame it slightly differently.
How so?
Well, it isn't just about ignoring nature. It's about the inherent danger of pure theory. Old Major is a prize boar, right?
Yeah. He's never actually worked a day in his life.
Exactly. He admits he has had a lot of time for thought alone in his stall. He is essentially an academic generating a flawless pitch deck.
A startup founder with a really good slide deck.
Perfect analogy. Revolutions in their incubation phase basically require a suspension of practical reality to generate the sheer kinetic energy needed to overthrow an entrenched oppressor like Mr. Jones. You cannot get bogged down in the logistical nightmare of dog-rat relations.
Right. You can't be like, well, actually, the supply chain of cheese is complicated.
Exactly. You have to bypass logic entirely and tap into absolute emotion.
Which totally explains the anthem, Beasts of England,
Oh, anthems are critical mechanisms of totalitarian architecture.
because they bypass the brain.
Yes. Beasts of England paints a vivid sensory picture of a golden future time where harnesses rust and whips crack no more.
It's very catchy.
It provides a shared emotional frequency. When the animals sing it, like 5 times in succession right after the speech, they aren't rationalizing agricultural policy.
No, they're just vibing.
They're feeling a collective, almost religious sense of destiny. It binds that binary man bad, animal good directly into their nervous systems,
But then Old Major dies peacefully in his sleep 3 nights later.
leaving the mess to everyone else.
Right. He leaves the actual execution of this grand theory to a completely different set of personalities. And we see the work of organizing naturally fall to the pigs, specifically Snowball, Napoleon, and Squealer.
Who take Old Major's ideas and elaborate them into a complete system of thought called animalism.
But the transition from theory to practice instantly reveals these deeply ingrained psychological issues among the oppressed animals, doesn't it?
Oh, immediately. The pigs try to educate the others, but they run into massive cognitive barriers right out of the gate.
Like Molly.
Yes, Molly the white mare. Her primary concern isn't liberty or equality. She just wants to know if there will still be sugar and if she can wear ribbons in her mane.
And Snowball gives her this incredibly austere response, right? He's like, can't you understand that liberty is worth more than ribbons?
But she clearly doesn't, and she represents a very real demographic in any societal upheaval.
The people who just want to be comfortable.
Right. She's not motivated by abstract, philosophical concepts of liberty. She's motivated by immediate material comforts. For her, comfortable subjugation is vastly preferable to austere freedom. She just lacks the ideological framework to value what Snowball is offering.
Wow. Yeah, and then on the completely opposite end of that spectrum, you've got the pigs dealing with Moses.
Moses the tame raven.
Right, and his tales of Sugar Candy Mountain.
Moses is such a fascinating thermodynamic release valve for the farm.
Release valve.
Yeah. He claims to know of this mysterious country in the sky where it's Sunday 7 days a week, and lump sugar grows on the hedges.
Sounds nice.
It does. But he represents the use of religious or afterlife promises to placate a suffering working class.
Oh, because if the animals genuinely believe they will be rewarded with infinite clover after they die, the urgency to overthrow Mr. Jones today completely evaporates.
Exactly. That is exactly the threat the pigs perceive. Moses turns their suffering into a necessary prologue for a heavenly reward, rather than an injustice that needs to be rectified right now in the present.
So they have to crush that idea.
They have to work so fiercely to persuade the animals that Sugar Candy Mountain is a lie. They need the animals' despair anchored entirely in the physical world to fuel the rebellion.
Yet the rebellion itself isn't even a masterstroke of the pigs' planning.
No, it's completely spontaneous.
It's an accidental explosion. Jones neglects them, goes on a bender in Wellington, and the animals are left starving.
Hunger is the catalyst.
Right. A cow breaks down the door of the store shed, and when the men arrive with whips, the animals just snap. It's pure biological desperation that drives Jones off the farm.
Which highlights a crucial historical reality. Philosophical debates rarely spark the actual moment of revolution.
It's always about food.
Almost always. The breaking point is usually a failure of the oppressor to maintain basic infrastructure. But once the adrenaline fades and the humans are actually gone, the animals are left with this massive, terrifying responsibility of governing themselves.
First, they destroy all the instruments of oppression. The bits, the nose rings, the dog chains. They burn the whips in the yard.
A very symbolic cleansing.
Very. And then the pigs reveal they've taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book that belonged to Jones's children.
And that changes everything.
It really does. Snowball paints Animal Farm over Manor Farm on the gate, and they distill animalism into the 7 Commandments on the tarred wall of the big barn.
This is the critical transition point, the creation of a codified law.
Right.
The commandments include maxims against wearing clothes, sleeping in beds, drinking alcohol, and killing other animals, culminating in the foundational rule, all animals are equal.
Okay, I look at those commandments on the wall, and I can't shake this profound sense of complicity from the general animal population.
Complicity, how so?
Well, the pigs read the rules aloud,
Right.
and the animals all nod in complete agreement. But only the pigs can actually read the text.
I see where you're going.
I feel like they are completely complicit here. They nodded along to a legal document they couldn't comprehend, so on some level they invite the exploitation that follows. It's like a terms of service agreement today.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. Like everyone clicks agree when they download an app, but nobody actually reads the 50 pages of legal jargon. But does that mean true equality ever existed?
I see why you draw that conclusion, but I would actually challenge that assumption of complicity.
Okay, challenge it.
I'd point to the massive cognitive disparity. You cannot genuinely consent to a system you physically lack the education to comprehend.
That's fair.
The moment you have a society where only a select few hold the key to interpreting the law, which in this case is literacy, you have a latent hierarchy.
Right, from day one.
Yes. The pigs don't take leadership by force initially. They take it because they possess superior knowledge. But that very natural assumption of leadership is the seed of their eventual tyranny. The knowledge gap is fundamentally a power gap.
And we see that power gap translate immediately into resource control, like the very same day.
No.
Yes. The first harvest is about to start. The cows are milked by the pigs. Somebody asks what will happen to the milk, and Napoleon steps in front of the buckets, telling them to focus on the harvest, not the milk.
And when they return from the fields,
The milk is gone.
it is the first hidden theft. The pigs identify themselves as a vanguard class, quietly siphoning resources while the rest of the farm is distracted by the euphoria of their initial success.
And the success is genuine, for a time.
It is. The first harvest is a huge win.
The animals are happy, they have more food. Boxer, the enormous cart horse, adopts his personal motto, I will work harder.
He's the backbone of the farm.
He really is.
Oh.
And Snowball attempts to set up all these committees, the Egg Production Committee, the Clean Tails League for the cows. Most of them fail completely, but the reading classes reveal the true structural fault lines of this new society.
The disparity is just staggering. The pigs read perfectly, of course. The dogs learn to read, but they only care about reading the 7 Commandments. Benjamin, the cynical donkey, can read just as well as the pigs, but he refuses to use the skill, claiming there is nothing worth reading.
And Boxer is just the ultimate tragedy here.
He cannot get beyond the letter D.
He traces A, B, C, D in the dust with his hoof. And when he finally learns E, F, G, H, he realizes he's forgotten the first 4 letters. He just settles for D. And most of the farm can't even get past the letter A.
Boxer embodies the dedicated, loyal, yet intellectually limited working class. He possesses tremendous physical strength and an unwavering moral dedication to the collective good.
But he lacks the analytical capacity to question the systems directing his labor.
Exactly. And because of this massive cognitive bottleneck across the whole farm, Snowball is forced to reduce the complex constitution of the 7 Commandments into a single digestible slogan.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Yes. which the sheep adopt instantly.
Oh my gosh, the sheep, they bleated for hours on end.
And reducing complex constitutional law into a mindless slogan is catastrophic for a developing society.
Because it stops people from thinking.
Precisely. A slogan isn't designed to inspire critical thought. It is a linguistic tool designed to terminate it. When the sheep chant, they aren't engaging with the philosophical nuances of animalism. They are creating a wall of sound that drowns out analysis. It becomes a pure mechanism for conformity.
And that lack of analysis creates the absolutely perfect environment for Squealer.
Ah, Squealer, the PR department.
Yeah, he steps in to justify the first major systemic betrayal. Because the missing milk is finally discovered, it's being mixed into the pig's mash. And on top of that, the windfall apples are ordered to be brought directly to the harness room for the pigs.
The animals murmuring complaint, they thought things were going to be shared equally.
Right, so Squealer is deployed to handle the spin.
And Squealer's rhetoric here is a masterpiece of political manipulation.
It really is.
He doesn't deny they are taking the apples. Instead, he flips the narrative entirely. He claims the pigs actually dislike milk and apples.
Which is such a lie.
Of course. But he says they're eating them purely to preserve their health. He reframes a fundamentally selfish hoarding of resources as a supreme, burdensome sacrifice for the greater good of the farm.
But the truly insidious part is the specific language he uses. Like, here's where it gets really interesting to me. He tells them, milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig.
That's an indication of science.
He says, we pigs are brain workers. He invokes the aesthetic of scientific authority to shut them down. Isn't this the ultimate example of using authority to stop legitimate questioning? How does a horse argue with science?
They can't. The animals don't possess the epistemological tools to verify his claim. They don't know what a vitamin is.
Right.
So they are entirely dependent on the pig's interpretation of reality. But Squealer doesn't even stop at pseudoscience. He deploys the ultimate weapon right after that.
Preemptive fear.
Yes. He links the loss of their apples directly to the return of Mr. Jones. He says, do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back.
It creates a completely false dilemma.
Exactly. You either let us have the luxury resources or you return to chains and whips. There's no third option where everyone shares the apples.
And the animals are so traumatized by their past oppression that the mere invocation of Jones's name just paralyzes them.
They immediately concede the point.
So the hierarchy is now completely solidified.
Yes. It is backed by intellectual disparity, it's enforced by unequal resource distribution, and it is defended by manufactured terror.
And while this internal rot is really starting to take hold, the external world intervenes.
The humans realize what's happening.
Right. The neighboring farmers, Pilkington and Frederick, are terrified of the rebellion spreading to their own farms. So they attack, along with Jones, in what becomes known as the Battle of the Cowshed.
And while the physical combat is very dramatic, the psychological aftermath is what really demands our attention here.
Because Snowball proves himself to be a brilliant military tactician. He literally studied an old book of Julius Caesar's campaigns he found in the farmhouse.
He orchestrates a flawless defense. But the contrast between Snowball and Boxer in the immediate aftermath reveals a terrifying ideological divergence.
Boxer is so heartbreaking here. He rears up during the fight and strikes a stable lad with his iron-shod hoof, leaving the boy face down in the mud.
He thinks he killed him.
Right. And after the battle, Boxer is utterly devastated. He literally has tears in his eyes, mourning that he has taken a human life, even accidentally. He says he had no intention of doing it.
Boxer retains his fundamental moral compass. He recognizes the inherent tragedy of violence, regardless of the political justification.
But Snowball's bleeding from a gunshot wound across his back, and he just shuts Boxer's empathy down with chilling speed.
He says, no sentimentality, comrade. War is war. The only good human being is a dead one.
Snowball has wholly embraced the binary old major laid out. He has completely decoupled his empathy from his ideology.
It is the pragmatism of the revolutionary leader. Snowball views the death of the boy not as a tragic loss of a life, but as an objective mathematical good for the cause.
A statistic.
Exactly. And this decoupling of morality from action is an absolute prerequisite for the horrors that follow.
And those horrors accelerate as the political rivalry between Snowball and Napoleon reaches critical mass.
The windmill debate.
Yes, Snowball wants modernization. He draws these incredibly complex blueprints for a windmill to generate electricity on the farm.
And
Napoleon offers no alternative plans. Instead, he walks in, looks at the blueprints, literally urinates on them, and walks away.
It's such a visceral display of contempt.
Mm.
We often analyze Snowball as the idealistic politician and Napoleon as the ruthless pragmatist.
Right.
Snowball is looking at infrastructural futures, relying on rhetoric and debate to win the populace. Napoleon understands something much darker about the nature of power.
Which he proves on the day the windmill finally goes to a vote. Snowball gives this soaring, passionate speech. He has the crowd completely won over. And then Napoleon stands up, lets out this high-pitched whimper, and 9 enormous, ferocious dogs bound into the barn.
These are the puppies Napoleon took from their mothers, Jessie and Bluebell, right after the rebellion.
He raised them in complete isolation.
Yes, in a loft, away from everyone else.
It's not just a coup. I look at those dogs and it feels less like a political hostile takeover, though it is that, and more like a biological immune system that has turned into an autoimmune disease.
Oh, wow.
Like the dogs were supposed to be the protectors of the farm, but Napoleon has recoded them to attack the farm's own internal organs, starting with Snowball, who is chased through the hedge and is literally never seen again.
That autoimmune analogy is incredibly apt. Napoleon recognized that political authority without a monopoly on physical violence is completely fragile.
A speech is just words if the other guy has teeth.
Exactly. He didn't bother trying to outdebate Snowball. He spent months quietly cultivating a private military to render debate obsolete.
And he immediately abolishes the Sunday morning meetings. No more voting. All decisions will be made by a special committee of pigs presided over by himself.
The democratic facade is violently stripped away.
But nobody stops him.
The physical threat of the dogs silences any immediate protest. 4 young pigs actually try to speak up, but the dogs emit a deep, menacing growl and they fall silent.
The sheer proximity of violence terminates the political process.
Yes, and this is where Boxer's tragedy really deepens.
Yeah.
Unable to articulate his unease with what just happened, he adopts a second motto. Alongside "I will work harder," he now repeats "Napoleon is always right."
By outsourcing his critical thinking entirely to a single leader, hasn't Boxer just built his own cage?
He absolutely has. He weaponizes his own greatest virtue against himself. His unwavering loyalty becomes the engine of his own ongoing exploitation.
That's so sad.
He provides the immense physical labor required to sustain the regime while voluntarily surrendering the intellectual agency required to challenge it.
Which ushers in the most terrifying phase of the story. With Snowball exiled and the dogs acting as this omnipresent threat, the regime moves to control not just the labor of the farm, but the actual architecture of reality itself.
Yes.
Napoleon suddenly announces the windmill will be built after all. And Squealer is sent out to explain that Napoleon was never actually opposed to it. In fact, Squealer claims the blueprints were Napoleon's idea all along, and they were stolen by Snowball.
And when somebody asks why Napoleon opposed it so fiercely if it was his idea, Squealer introduces a new concept: tactics.
Tactics.
He claims it was a complex maneuver to get rid of the dangerous character Snowball. The animals don't even understand the word, but Squealer speaks so persuasively and the dogs with him growl so threateningly that they just accept the explanation without further questions.
And then the labor demands become astronomical. They are working a 60-hour week, and Napoleon introduces voluntary work on Sunday afternoons.
Voluntary.
Right, but the catch is, any animal who absents himself has his rations reduced by half.
Notice the systemic corruption of language there. Words begin to mean their exact opposite. Voluntary now means mandatory under threat of starvation.
Wow.
If you control the definitions of words, you control the boundaries of allowable thought.
And the physical boundaries of the rules begin to warp, too. Napoleon announces they will engage in trade with neighboring human farms using a solicitor named Mr. Whymper.
Breaking another rule.
Right. And then the pigs move into the farmhouse. They start sleeping in beds. Clover the horse is deeply suspicious. She remembers a definite ruling against beds, so she gets Muriel the goat to read the 4th commandment on the barn wall.
But the text has changed.
It now reads, "No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets."
This is gaslighting executed on a societal scale. The pigs don't just break the established law, they physically alter the written record to align with their transgressions.
They are rewriting reality.
And in doing so, they force the animals to doubt their own lived memories.
Squealer easily convinces them they dreamt the prohibition against beds, arguing that a bed is just a place to sleep, no different from a pile of straw. He says the sheets were the human invention.
It's brilliant and it's evil.
It's like an algorithmic filter on a social media feed today, you know?
Yeah.
It alters your perception of reality so incrementally that you don't even realize your entire worldview has been shifted until it's too late.
The epistemological collapse is profound. The animals lose their grip on what is real and what is fabricated, but the regime's absolute masterstroke of manipulation happens when the winter storm destroys the half-built windmill.
The animals wake up, and they are devastated by the ruin of their labor. The stones are everywhere. Napoleon paces in silence, inspects the damage, and instantly, without a shred of investigation, declares, "Snowball has done this thing,"
He issues a death sentence for his former rival on the spot.
which is the creation of the mythological boogeyman.
Yes. Snowball ceases to be a historical figure and becomes the invisible enemy. He is the omnipresent scapegoat for every single failure of the regime.
If the windmill falls down due to poor engineering and thin walls, it isn't Napoleon's failure.
No, it is Snowball's unseen sabotage.
And the conditions just deteriorate into outright horror from there. The winter is bitter, the potato crop freezes, starvation literally stares them in the face. But Napoleon is obsessed with concealing this reality from the outside world.
He has to maintain the image.
So he fills the empty grain bins with sand, tops them with the remaining grain, and tricks Mr. Whymper into thinking they are prosperous.
The image of the utopian state must be maintained for external consumption, even as the internal citizenry starves to death. The aesthetic of success supersedes the actual survival of the animals.
Which finally leads to the first internal rebellion. Napoleon orders the hens to surrender their eggs to pay for grain.
Which goes against everything Old Major said.
Exactly. So the hens fly up to the rafters, laying their eggs so they smash on the floor below in protest.
And Napoleon's response is absolute clinical ruthlessness.
He starves them.
He stops their rations entirely and decrees death to any animal who gives them a single grain of corn. The hens hold out for 5 days before capitulating.
And 9 hens die.
9 of their own.
We've gone from fighting humans to protect the farm to the leadership intentionally starving its own citizens to death to fulfill economic contracts with humans.
The regime has perfectly replicated the mechanisms of their former oppressors.
And to justify this escalating internal violence, Squealer's revisionism reaches a fever pitch. He announces the discovery of secret documents proving Snowball was allied with Jones from the very beginning.
Actively trying to ensure their defeat at the Battle of the Cowshed.
Even Boxer tries to push back against this one. He remembers Snowball fighting bravely. He remembers the gunshot wound.
But Squealer expertly twists the narrative again. He claims the wound was part of a prearranged plot, and that Napoleon was the true hero who sank his teeth into Jones's leg.
Which is completely made up.
Completely. But he relies on the passage of time and the animal's fading memories to implant a completely fabricated history.
So what does this all mean? I look at Squealer rewriting the Battle of the Cowshed, and I have to ask, what is the true fatal blow to this society?
What do you think it is?
Well, is the real tragedy of these chapters the literal physical starvation of the animals and the death of the hens? Or is it the complete and utter destruction of their objective truth?
That is the big question.
Because if a regime can convince you that the bleeding hero of your own revolution was actually the villain orchestrating your downfall, haven't they stolen something far more vital than your food?
I would argue the destruction of truth is the foundational tragedy, absolutely.
Because it enables everything else.
Exactly. It makes the physical tragedies inescapable. Starvation weakens the body, sure, but the systematic demolition of objective reality destroys the capacity to even conceptualize a better alternative.
You can't fight back if you don't even know what's real.
Right. The animals are trapped in a shifting present. The past is whatever Napoleon requires it to be today, and the future is an endless cycle of grueling labor. Without a shared objective truth, there is no mechanism for accountability, and therefore no possibility of justice.
Wow. We have tracked an incredibly dark trajectory today.
We really have.
We started with Old Major's bright, theoretical dream of a world free from exploitation. We examined how the knowledge gap was weaponized into a power gap.
We saw the deployment of pseudoscience and fear to justify the hoarding of resources.
We witnessed the violent suppression of political opposition through a private military. And finally, we watched the systematic gaslighting of an entire population until they could no longer trust their own memories.
And while Orwell was specifically critiquing the events surrounding the Russian Revolution and the rise of Stalinism, the sociological and psychological mechanics he mapped out are deeply universal.
And that is exactly why this source material remains so vital for you, the listener, to engage with today. This isn't just a historical post-mortem about farm animals or 20th century history. It is an active blueprint for recognizing how authoritarian control creeps into our modern structures.
In daily life, in workplaces, in media.
Right. It doesn't usually arrive with a sudden military coup. It arrives incrementally.
Step by step.
It arrives over debates about who gets the milk and apples. It arrives with subtle semantic shifts in the laws we thought were permanent. It arrives when leaders demand you reject the evidence of your own eyes and rely solely on their interpretation of reality.
The tactics of linguistic manipulation, the creation of invisible enemies to justify centralized power, and the exploitation of a distracted populace, these are mechanisms employed across various spectrums of modern governance and corporate power today.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly terrifying concept for you to consider as we wrap up this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time discussing how the pigs utilized their monopoly on literacy as their primary weapon to secure and maintain power.
Right? They could read, the others couldn't.
In a world of manor farm, the ability to read the words on the barn wall was the ultimate divider between the oppressors and the oppressed. But what is the equivalent mechanism today? We live in an era of algorithmic feeds and endless information overload. We aren't starved for text, we are drowning in it.
That's very true.
But in a landscape flooded with AI-generated content, hyperpartisan spin, and deeply manipulated media, is the inability to critically analyze a source to separate the factual foundation from the emotional manipulation exactly the same thing as Clover, staring helplessly at the barn wall, knowing the letters have changed but unable to read the words.
That is a profoundly unsettling parallel. If we possess the mechanical ability to read the words, but we lack the critical framework to comprehend the truth or the deception behind them,
Then what?
then we are functionally no freer than the horses trusting Squealer's statistics.
We want to sincerely thank you for bringing such rich, complex source material to the table. Unpacking the architecture of this society has been a deeply sobering but wildly fascinating experience. Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking closely at the blueprints, and we will see you on the next deep dive.